All right. May as well kick it off with the first question. Why should the people of Cowper vote for you?
Right. Well, I guess I'd sum it up in 6 main reasons at this point. We need to reduce the impact of corporations in policy decisions. In government, we currently have a situation where the people who make the decisions for policies and their parties are paid by corporations that are financially advantaged by those decisions. The Greens don't accept corporate donations. We have set up a system where one person cannot change that, and we cannot accept corporate donations. This means that we're not required to feather the nest of those corporations in that regard. I seem to see a lot of policy decisions over the past few years and ramping up at this point that do bias these corporations. I feel as though the middle class are being taxed, and that's given to the rich and the wealthy and through corporations, and the poor are being forgotten, and I'd like to change that. The second would be a sensible policy for housing and a sensible direction for housing. We have the current government stoking demand. They have given $180 billion, or we have given as taxpayers, $180 billion through a term funding facility to the banks at 0.1% interest rates. And they have used that to stoke the housing market and not supported business in the way I feel it should have been used. As a result, we have unbelievably high house prices here, and certainly a lot higher than the rest of the world. This has not been done by a mistake. This is a policy direction, and I'd like to change that direction. I think we should use certain levers to control the housing market, or should I say, remove levers that are encouraging the housing market to grow in such a way it is. And this is putting people out, particularly in Cowper here, where we have a coastal strip that is overpriced in some ways for locals, and they're having to move out. We have businesses struggling to get people to get to work because they've got to drive so far. And this is an unfortunate situation, and that's something I'd like to focus on, using my skills as someone who's worked in the development control industry for 20 plus years. I'd like to act on Australia's natural competitive advantage in regards to renewable energy. I'd like to drive jobs growth and economic growth using that competitive advantage. We currently are propping up the fossil fuel industry, which is a sunset industry. It has spent many years getting the number of jobs in that industry down and mechanising. Sunrise industries provide a lot more jobs, particularly in the early phases. The renewable energy sector is a sunrise industry, and therefore will create more jobs than the sunset industries. Australia has plentiful sun, plentiful wind, plentiful space. These are amazing assets that other countries don't have. In the long run, our power will be cheaper because we have those advantages. So why aren't we heading down that path today? The dependence on oil for everything we do is really worrying to me, and I think it's risking our national security, relying on countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Asia for our way of life, everything we do, just getting to the job, just going down to the shops. The Greens are hoping to extend Medicare and include some of the basics of life that aren't in there. Dental and mental health are not in Medicare, and we'd like to include them into Medicare. Medicare is an amazing system and certainly the envy of many areas of the world. And I'd like to protect that, build on it, and ensure the funding is strong in that area. So we need to think about how we're going to pay for some of these things if we're going to add those into Medicare. I've been doing some investigations, and the Greens have found out that a lot of billionaires aren't paying their fair share of tax. This is unfair. And so we're going to tax billionaires at a blanket rate, if required, to make sure that people pay their fair share. A third of large corporations in Australia pay no tax at all, more than I do and a teacher does. This is unfair. We need to change this system so that corporations pay their fair share of tax. They are using our country. They are using our facilities, getting advantage. There's no reason why they can't pay their fair share of tax. And the last point, the sixth point I'd like to make, is that we would like to make free education for all in Australia. We've had a situation where a number of the politicians have had free education over their life, and then it's over my life, the price has increased. My first degree, where I did it, cost around $15,000. That is now over $100,000 when we have increasing cost of living, really expensive house prices. And now we have that as a burden for young people to get into life. That is really difficult. When we could actually change the system and actually make corporations pay their tax and funnel that into free education for our young people and for anyone who likes to further their skills. So they're the 6 main points I'd like to make for that question.
All right, thank you for that one. Next question is, how would you represent the people of Cowper in Parliament?
As a scientist, I would focus on evidence-based decision making. We need to look at the evidence, not obfuscate, and we need to give that evidence careful consideration and decide along that evidence. Again, I go back to the fact that if you have a corporation making a payment, you might want to give them some type of advantage. If we can cut that out of the system, it better enables the politicians, such as myself, to use the evidence and not worry about other influences and make the best decisions for the people. I'd like to restore science to its position. Transparency is really important in governance, and I don't see that much at the moment. We should be our CSIRO should be well funded and well supported as a champion of industry and a champion of ideas. Other areas we could support and use to build jobs is areas like the Bureau of Meteorology, using evidence-based decisions to focus on innovative solutions for the future. I would say I'm a conservative when it comes to spending money. I don't like the fact that our current government seems to spend an awful lot of money for very little outcome. We've just had JobKeeper, where it's been found that a lot of the companies that got JobKeeper actually made a profit. We've just spent $5 billion plus on submarines that have never turned up, and we have nothing to show for it. We've spent $3 billion on tanks, even though we're an island, as far as I'm aware, without a decent missile defense system. These are spends that are risky in my eyes, considering we have more conservative options where we could get better bang for our buck. And I'd like to focus on that. In that process, there's a number of large amounts of money and contracts that are going out without tender and a lot of those are being siphoned off through consultants. I think we could save a lot of money there. I think we could actually use tenders like a normal business would and use that process to make sure we get better outcomes for the community with the amount of money we have. I'd like to restore some dignity into Parliament. I think at the moment, a lot of the people I talk to are saying that it seems like they're children and they're arguing. And this is really unfortunate considering the position and importance of parliaments. So I'd like to restore that dignity, and there's a couple of ways. I'll give you one example. There's a law made in 1905, I believe, where we didn't have time periods in our discussions in Parliament. And so this law has been used by the Liberal Party recently, even though we now do have time periods, to stop discussion. And it's where you stand up and the party says, I put forward that the member no longer be heard. This has been used hundreds of times to stop discussion in our Parliament. Considering we have time periods now, this is a law that is no longer required. And I will try and change these processes so we can have open discussion in Parliament and open dissent for a better future. The differences in this country make us stronger, and we need to remember that. A federal ICAC is needed. We have a system where there's perceived corruption and the community are losing faith. We need to restore that faith in our decision makers because they're important positions. So I would like to continue the Greens push to get a federal ICAC into Parliament, a strong one that can require people and force people to actually come to the ICAC and actually tell what they need to. We need to make sure that those people making those decisions aren't the people being investigated. So we need an arm's length ICAC. I'm concerned about the national security risks that we have in this country at the moment. The dependence on oil, something I've already spoken about, is a big concern for me, as every single day I'm requiring other countries to supply what I need to do my basic getting to job and getting food. I think we can diversify considering we have the options. I'd personally love an electric car. They cost about a tenth of a normal car, of an oil car to run. And I'd prefer to pay less. Other people may not, and that's up to them. But we should at least give this option to the people. We've also forgotten our Pacific friends. The recent decisions in the Solomon Islands were unfortunate. And as someone who grew up in Papua New Guinea myself, I believe that we should keep Australia strong by supporting our democratic friends in the Pacific in particular. The risks from climate change is real to them today, and they are screaming out for help. And I don't see us helping them in the current state that we are. And we should extend a hand to them. We should make sure that they can grow their country, grow their economy, as well as deal with the risks of climate change on their people and on their health. Thanks.
Thank you for that. The next question is, what will you provide to the people of Cowper?
Well, as someone who's worked in the housing and development space for some time, I have a lot of skills in the area for housing and planning. I've been really disappointed in the planning. Now, I know that most of that is a state issue, but if the state are going to continually put people in harm's way and risk the health of the community, the federal government does have the capacity to put in overarching controls. We have an area here in Coffs Harbour where I announced the Argyle Estate, where they flood today, they flood quite regularly, and they're looking at doing more, the rezoning it and putting more houses in there and more flats and more people in harm's way. I think this is the wrong direction. If we've got an increased amount of flooding, and the data and evidence shows that this will increase in an accelerating and non-linear way, I would like to put forward that we ban all residential development in areas that flood. I didn't think this was a difficult thing to do, but it seems to be difficult. And I'd like to use courage and strength to ensure that lives are saved and the health is put first above profits. There are many things we can do in the housing space. There is money laundering in Australia's housing and in Cowper. There is short-term accommodation, which particularly impacts us here in Cowper on the coastal strip. And we have empty houses sitting there when people can't find somewhere to live. We need to control the demand. Now, what mechanisms we use, there are many options for that. And the Greens have got a number of proposals. One I'd like to just mention today is that we're going to try and build 1 million homes over the next 10 years. This may be difficult and is quite aspirational, but it's worth a try. And most of those homes will be used to give to the community in regards to a rental scheme where they will rent it at 25% of their income, whatever their income is. This will help many people of low income and medium income actually be able to stay in the town that they have grown up in and that their family are in and their support services are in. Another area is jobs growth. I'd like to focus on jobs growth in Cowper. One of the proposals the Greens have been put forward and currently in the state government through Cape Fairmont is the Great Koala National Park. This has a number of jobs. I like the idea of these jobs too, because just like the koala, if we look after the koala, if we keep the koala, in my eyes, that's a job producing creature forever. People come from around the world to see this amazing species that for us is easy to manage, certainly easier than lions, tigers, and elephants that other countries have to look after. This is an animal that lives in a tree. We just need to keep the trees. It has specific trees it eats, and it's actually quite a good breeder if allowed to breed. So we should focus on those long-term jobs. in Cowper, we have a number of issues in regards to water quality, and I'd like to ensure that the industries in this area are regulated and controlled to ensure our water quality. And there are jobs in riparian restoration, but also in agriculture in this area. We have some great areas, good soil, good rainfall. There's opportunities in the future for us to grow our agricultural sector and get more jobs and products for the community. And that's great. One area I've really struggled with is transport. Because of the lack of planning, our transport situation is atrocious. We still don't have a bypass here in Coffs Harbour after 40 years of waiting. Port Macquarie has a traffic jam every single day, even though it doesn't have the very big population. That Oxley Highway just chocks up every time. This wasn't done over time, it was allowed, and that's really disappointing. We're at a situation where the loss in economic output from all of those people sitting in that traffic jam every day is higher than the cost to actually build another road or sort out the infrastructure. So we need planning. We need long-term planning. If the climate is going to change as severely as it's been predicted to change, we need to look at potentially moving some of our main infrastructure. Coffs Harbour has the hospital, the road, the airport, the train line, the industrial area, the emergency services of the ambulance and the fire brigade, all in flood zones. These can't be accessed during flood times. Proper planning will move those over time to make sure that they can be accessed by the community. Because when there are difficult times, that's when we need that infrastructure. Certainly the recent floods have shown the failure of this infrastructure up north. And Coffs Harbour here, we dodged a bullet as the highway was just about to go under and it stopped raining. And at the same time, we had a low tide. If it was different, our industrial area just down from where I live would have flooded. Those people in Argyle Estate would have flooded. It went up to their shed and ruined their mowers, and that was unfortunate, but it didn't get in their house. We may not be that lucky next time. We have to prepare for this. We have to plan for this. We have to look at where we can put people in the future so we can have affordable housing that's safe for the long term and in an area where we can access jobs. Thanks.